You're listening to the Picks from the Paddock, a Turf Talk podcast.
Good evening, everyone. It is 9:10 on what is Monday, the 13th of September. I'm Rory Paddock, and it is the Turf Talk podcast for picksfromthepaddock.co.uk. As always, it's not just me. I've got the enjoyable company of Mr. Christopher Connolly and Mr. Matt Polly. How are you doing, boys?
Not bad.
Yeah, good.
Good. I might as well jump into things. Not too long ago this afternoon, before we obviously jumped on air and recorded this, the big sort of breaking news, as it were, in the racing world is the retirement of Altior today. Nicky Henderson announced it from Seven Barrows earlier this afternoon. I think the last time we saw him step foot on the race course was, I think, when he finished second behind Granatine in the celebration chase at Sandown. But prior to that, I mean, what a career. Just to kind of throw out the stats before we sort of like sing his praises. I think he went on a staggering 19 race winning streak that stretched from, I think it was the 10th of October 2015 until the 23rd of November 2019. He won 16 graded races, of which 10 of them were grade 1s. That included 4 consecutive grade 1 Cheltenham Festival victories. That included 3 champion chases, a Supreme Novices Hurdle, Tingle Creek Chase win, victories over the likes of Soar Royale, Politolog, Fox Norton, Min, Special Tiara, Undersow, amongst others. Matt, I'll come to you. Surely one of the greatest 2-mile chasers that we've ever seen.
Yeah, no doubt. You mentioned his 19 race unbeaten run. You know, people are very quick to knock champions, aren't they? Want to try and knock them off their pedestal, but and you could say some of the races he had. I mean, they were not gimmies, but for grade 1 races, they maybe a slight lack of opposition, lack of numbers. But to get any horse to win 19 races in a row, it doesn't really matter what the opposition is. To keep a horse fit, sound, healthy, to turn up and win multiple races, especially on the trot, is a phenomenal achievement from the horse and the people involved with the horse. And let's not forget, this is over obstacles. So not only does the horse have to gallop 2.5 miles, he's also got a serious amount of large black obstacles to negotiate as well. It's not like he's running over 6 furlongs on the flat, where you can turn these horses around much quicker and it probably takes less out of them. So no surprise that he's been retired, really. He's been in a state of sort of semi-retirement for the last 2 seasons, if we're brutally honest. So it's not the biggest surprise. He's retired at the right time. He's got nothing to prove. He's certainly not going to get any better at his age. So definitely the right decision to retire him. But yeah, absolutely phenomenal racehorse, good-looking horse, and a credit to all connections.
Yeah, very much so, Matt. I think I'll come to you with this one, Chris. I mean, you can't really crab anything that he's done. I know that not long ago, I think it was episode 1. This is obviously episode 5 now. We did a poll in terms of who was the best 2-mile chaser. I think you ended up putting forward one of my personal favourites, Moscow Flyer. Matt went with Sprinter Sacra. Do you think something that might potentially tarnish sort of not necessarily the love for Altior, but sort of the belief that he was right the best, perhaps 3rd best, 4th best 2-mile chaser, was Seven Barrows, Nicky Henderson's decision to go and try and do something different? There was a lot of muted talk about going for a King George. There was a lot of talk about him stepping up to 2-mile 5. He obviously come and stuck against the likes of Surname and didn't win his last race either. Do you think that potentially could ruin his legacy, or is that just a blip in an otherwise perfect career?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some unsatisfactory happenings during the career of Altior, the will he, won't he run, carry on that's been going on. Like Matt said, he's been basically in semi-retirement for the last couple of years, and we've found out more about his participation within races from a certain bookmaker's blogs, which is a little bit disappointing, of course. But you can't knock the horse's achievement. Absolutely wonderful animal. One of the best 2-milers of the last 20, 30 years. Certainly up there in the top 5, no doubt about it. I mean, like Matt said, to get these horses back to the track and to win 19 races in succession, it takes some doing. So whilst there are obviously unsatisfactory elements to the horse and the way he was campaigned and everything else, you don't want to knock the horse too much. He did pretty much everything right when he was asked to, and the way he went about winning these races, he was a bit of a hero-like horseman. He was a hard horse. When he was asked for more, he found more, and I think the public warmed to horses like that. Fabulous horse. I hope he has a great retirement. I believe he's gone to Mickey Fitzgerald's yard, so he doesn't owe us a penny. He didn't have to move up in trip, in my opinion, and it was probably desperation, given that the horse was coming towards the end of his career and probably didn't have that lightning turn of gear that he used to have at the end of his 2-mile races.
I suppose it's one of those you can't really crab connections too much. You try it and you fail, which unfortunately what happened, then you get lambasted. But if you don't try, then you get lambasted for what ifs, what might have been. So, I mean, obviously it perhaps wasn't the fairy tale ending that we hope for a horse of that sort of stature, but, looking at his achievements, bloody hell, you'd be more than happy to have a horse like that and you're racing in your colours when you're so, like you said, off to live a retirement life, off to the retirement home with Mickey Fitz. Pretty apt sort of companion, I suppose, for the rest of his time. So yeah, from the three of us, hats off to Altior and good luck for the future. Looking at horses who are still involved on the racetrack, obviously we saw it was Doncaster St Ledger meeting last week, boys, with 4 days there at Donny. I'm not going to go through it all, but what we will focus on is the main event that was Saturday, where Hurricane Lane produced a demolition job in the St Ledger. Now, I know we don't exactly know what the horse is beating in terms of form going forward, and only time will tell just how good the horse can be if it carries on as a 4-year-old. How good this 3-year-old crop may or may not be. But prior to that, obviously he's an Irish Derby winner. He's won a Group 1 in France. I want to come to you, Chris. Possibly the best Ledger winner of the past 10, maybe 20 years? Or is that too premature? Or do you think it's going to be another case of logician story who promised a lot at 3 and then failed to deliver? I mean, that's if he even has a 4-year-old campaign. Or is he off to the sheds come November time?
Well, a lot will depend on whether or not he participates in the Arc. From my point of view, I can't understand why he's not favourite for the Arc. He's beaten the Derby runner-up comfortably in the St Ledger. His form looks rock solid. You have to remember at Epsom when he was beaten, I think he lost 2 of his hind shoes or front shoes. He definitely lost shoes during that race. So there's an automatic excuse for him there. His form over middle distance trips with Adia, that is rock solid form. Adia, I believe, had an infection in his hind leg, which forced him to bypass the Niel with him over the weekend. Strictly speaking, going into the Arc, what are we, just under a month off? Hurricane Lane, for me, turns up as favourite, and if he's at his very best, a few of the others have got slight question marks. I know there's a decent trial in Ireland over the weekend, the Champion Stakes, if you like. It was a bit of a mess, in my opinion, but Tanawa was a clear eye catcher. But going to the Arc, I think Hurricane Lane should be a clear favourite. His form adds up to being favourite. He'll go on any ground. He's likely to get a bit of cut in the ground as well. There'll be a decent pace to wear mark. He's rock solid. And yeah, he's probably one of the better Ledger winners of the last decade, without question. I can't see anything wrong with him. He's extremely progressive, in my opinion. And if he stays in training next season, can't see why he wouldn't get any better. But he's a high-class 3-year-old, as things stand.
Matt, probably one of the best Ledger winners. I mean, obviously, we've all crabbed the Ledger. Some of the winners that we've had in the past 10, 15 years have been woeful, to say the least. But perhaps the best we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, he's a classy horse. There's no doubt about that. He, a Dante when they went to the Derby, finished third, as Chris alluded to. He lost 2 front shoes that day, and he definitely didn't suit the track. Personally, I didn't think Epsom would suit him anyway, and they had to take their chance there. They had to run there, and he was actually, a shorter price than Adair. Adair was a bit of a surprise package on the day, or even though he got back from 50s down to 16s before the off. I was really surprised at how well Hurricane Lane ran in the Derby, and then, like I said, if you consider he'd lost 2 front shoes as well, that's been his only blip, if you like, so far in his career, and you can't really call it a blip, finishing third in the Derby with some things against you. When he won the Irish Derby, when he mowed down Lone Eagle, he had a lot of ground to make up that day. So not only did he show a good turn of foot to catch the winner, he showed that he had an abundance of stamina as well, which you could have argued maybe up until that point. And then, of course, he won in France, and absolute high-class horse. And it would have been a massive disappointment, a massive anticlimax if he hadn't have won the St Leger, despite the fact he was obviously untested at the Marlin 6. But he was undoubtedly the best horse in that race. It remains. Mojo Star's a nice horse, but it remains to be seen what will happen to the rest of of that field going forward. But like I said, it would have been a complete shock. I was trying to find a horse against him, maybe to put up as a value each way bet, but he was always the most likely winner, and he won it quite comfortably in the end. In terms of the Arc, he seems like a really hardy horse, doesn't he? So, would the Arc be one race too many? I couldn't see him going to America because I think the ground would be too fast. But I think, they'll obviously have to see how he comes out of the St Leger. But I think it all hinges on Adair. I think if Adair has got over his minor issue, I think Adair will go to the Arc, and they may skip the Arc with Hurricane Lane because they've got Adair in there. I think if Adair hasn't recovered from his minor setback and he doesn't make it, I could definitely see them running Hurricane Lane as an alternative. He's had some hard races. That race at the Curragh was a hard race. And even though he won the Leger comfortably, there's bound to have taken a bit out of him. But he seems like a horse with a really good constitution. So I can't see, if I'm honest, I can't see them running them both in the Arc. So I think it all hinges on where Adair goes. I think if he doesn't go to the Arc, Hurricane Lane will replace him. I think if Adair goes to the Arc, I think they might just leave Hurricane Lane alone. But in terms of do they keep Hurricane Lane in training next year? It's always we don't know. Is the bottom line. They might. It's really sad. I mean, he's a top class horse, and Frankel, his sire, also the Frankel of Adair's, had a fantastic season, obviously. And maybe if they keep Hurricane Lane in training, they might go for some sexier races. Maybe as a 4-year-old, maybe drop him back to a mile and a quarter, mile and a half, and win a King George or something, just for a bit more appeal as a stallion. But whatever happens, he doesn't owe anybody anything. I mean, he's been an absolute superstar, hasn't he? Hurricane Lane. So,
was they just touching upon the Arc as well for those that are interested? As it stands, just coming up to 9:25 at night on Monday the 13th. The current odds. You got Tarnoir, best price, 100-30 favourite. Adair, 7-2. Hurricane Lane, best price, 5-1. And then Snowfall, 11-2. 12-1 bar the rest. I'm not going to start asking for any sort of Arc preview, but of those 4, do you think potentially Hurricane Lane is a decent price at 5, Chris?
Well, he's a much better price than Tarnoir is at 100-30. Yeah, I watched the Irish Champion at the weekend, and it was an absolute mess. She got carried halfway across the track by St. Mark's Basilica, who was workmanlike. He hit, Poetic Player Paul had the race run to suit, and I think he might be getting a bit of a hard horse place now at Poetic Play. I'm not cribbing him. He's ground dependent, or to show his best he is. He ran a fine enough race, but they messed about, and I thought Colin Keane was rather considerate on Tarnower. It still, for me, doesn't add up to be a clear favourite for the Arca. Around 3-1 is far too short. She's 5-1 shot in my book. The Godolphin horses, I think, I'm not sure whether they'll go with both Godolphin horses, but given that it's been something of a renaissance the last few years for the boys in blue, I would imagine they'd be desperate to bag this race. So it's possible they could go with 2, or Hurricane Lane could go for the Champion Stakes at Ascot. But if gun to head, I don't see any value in Tarnower right now, and Snowfall would be a big no-no for me after getting beaten in France as well.
I mean, touching upon that, chaps, and moving on from Hurricane Lane, over in Ireland and in France, there were other top-class action over the weekend, which we've just touched upon. Again, I won't delve into it too much, but I know through social media there was a lot of chatter, a lot of questionable sort of comments about horses, jockeys' rides, maybe a few comments from jockeys themselves. And I know you, Chris, want to touch upon this recent sort of spate of jockeys' horsemanship, not just on the flat, but over jumps as well, as a general thing. We've also seen as well Sylvester De Souza. This is a man who was a former champion jockey, pick up yet another ban recently. I know it's perhaps opening up a potential can of worms, but it's something you do want to discuss. So in regards to the bigger picture, in regards to, quite simply, are jockeys as good as they are now as they used to be? I mean, I'll put my neck on the line and say, look, is it just a case of, and I'll play devil's advocate because I know what angle you're already coming at from this, Chris. I'm going to play devil's advocate. Surely with the sort of introduction of sports science, the introduction of being able to see races with various different camera angles, changes to rules over the last 10, 15 years, maybe. All of those can be a negative and a positive in terms of the way in which a horseman, a jockey rides a horse, and perhaps to compare what they are now to what they were even 10 years ago is perhaps a tad unfair. I will leave you with the floor, Mr. Connolly, though. I know you like a good rant. So on your head be it.
I mean, a lot of punters threw the toys out of the pram, particularly with the ride on Snowfall at the weekend, and a few of Frankie Dettori's comments afterwards that he believed that Holly Doyle, who was riding a pacemaker in this Aidan O'Brien, which is a sticky subject within itself, having pacemakers in races. But he concluded that Holly had not gone quick enough, and that maybe attributed to the loss of Snowfall. I just think way too often nowadays we're watching big races, and the same in the Irish Champion, where jockeys they're playing at jockey races rather than horse racing. It's so frustrating to watch. I mean, St. Mark's Basilica was impressive enough for a good winner at the weekend. It was a mess. The horse was halfway across the track. Ryan Moore didn't even try correcting him. And like I said, the race in France was, I mean, what an absolute farce. The winner of that race pulled like an absolute pulley thing for more than half the race, but somehow managed to have enough in reserve to win. And obviously Frankie was, I mean, he had to accept defeat, I suppose, on Snowfall. He didn't give her a hard time, but he was way too far out of his ground. And we've seen racing at Royal Ascot this season with jockeys shunning the far side. They're clearly advantageous part of the track. They're left alone. So you're having jockeys like Frankie Dettori, the only guy having the nous to go and pinch that type of ground and win the races. I think far too often nowadays, I don't know whether we should introduce pacemakers for all the Group 1 races to stop this happening, because a lot of them are turning into glorified egg and spoon jobs. They're going far too slow. They're turning into ridiculous sprints at the end, and it's a little bit unsatisfactory,
Yeah, I mean, in my sort of, short time watching racing, I certainly see a difference in regards to the way that major races have panned out. Whether or not that's down to the jockeys, whether or not that's down to connections, you see massive forces like Ballydoyle started implementing, pacemakers and making it more of a tactical team affair, which, you're meant to ride to your paymaster's instructions. Matt, you've obviously sat in the saddle. Have you noticed a massive change in a short space of time in regards to jockeys, the way they're riding, or is it just a case of things are changing simply because the times are changing?
Well, I think there's no doubt now that jockeys now are fitter than they ever were before. More stylish, probably more in tune with the horse. When you go back and watch, however good a lot of these ex-National Hunt jockeys were, there's definitely a difference in caliber now for me. Probably more so in jump racing than flat racing. For me, there's still not a lot between. If you go back to the 70s and 80s, when you think of Pat Edry and Steve Cawthon, Walter Swinburne, jockeys like that, they'd definitely still be competing at the highest level now if they were still riding. I think the likes of McCoy and Johnson took National Hunt racing to another level. So for me, the gulf is much wider in National Hunt racing now in quality of jockeys to flat jockeys. That's interesting, and we brought this up. I wasn't aware that we were going to talk about this before we came, just before we came on air. But a couple of things that Chris said, I agree with. The Tory incident on Snowfall was almost scandalous, really, to publicly call out another jockey, essentially blaming Ollie Doyle for his defeat, especially an experienced rider like De Tory, to try and put the blame on someone else. In turn, essentially saying that La Gioconda, who Holly Doyle was riding, was basically supposed to be sacrificed. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure that virtually all horses in all races are supposed to be running on their merits and actually not there to be sacrificed. So in a way, he's inadvertently dropped a bollock there, and and if he was unhappy with the pace, Dettori doesn't need to please anybody. He could do whatever he wants. He's not going to lose rides. It doesn't matter now. He's at the end of his career. He should have gone and sat. He should have gone and sat Holly Doyle's arse, and he'd have won the race. As simple as that. So the fact that he's then gone on there and basically said she was riding that horse as a sacrifice so he could win it was wrong. The fact that a guy that's been in the game so long as a professional to blame, criticise another jockey for his defeat was embarrassing, really, on Dettori's behalf. So we'll move on from that. Ryan Moore, I'm Ryan Moore's biggest fan. If I had a horse, he'd ride every horse for me. But if that was a 0 to 70 at Catterick, St Mark's Basilica gets disqualified every time. He's made no attempt. He's got his stick in the right hand, but he's made no attempt, as Chris said, to straighten that horse. He never moved his hands. He just had his head down. He was flailing away, and the horse was basically going where it wanted with no regard to what was on his outside. They almost took out half a dozen photographers, and if that hadn't have been the Irish Champions Stakes, he would have been disqualified, no doubt. And just another quick point without going on, I noticed earlier on, one of the few races I've watched lately, I walked in to watch Tom O'Brien ride a horse that won at Worcester. And I've noticed this for a long time now, and I've brought it up before, is that it seems to be overlooked that jockeys are hitting horses in the wrong place. The first time I really, really noticed it was Colin Keane on Tanawa in last year's Breeders' Cup when they did a slow-mo close-up. And I wish people would comment on this podcast, because I put it on Twitter, and I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong, but you cannot hit the horse where the number cloth sits. You cannot hit the horse on its flanks or on its ribcage. It's against the rules. It's against that. There has to be, when apprentice jockeys learn on equisizers, they have pads on the horse's quarters, and when you hit that pad with your stick, it makes a beep noise, and that beep noise is there to know that you've hit that horse in the correct place where you're supposed to hit a horse. And time again, I watch these races in close finishes. There's 3, 4, maybe even 5 strikes on the horse's ribcage, which is so ungratifying to watch. You're not supposed to hit them there. So when I made a comment on Twitter, I think it was, and there was a few people tagged in on that. I got no response whatsoever. I was happy for someone to come on and tell me I was wrong, to correct me, put me in my place, but not a single response. And I then followed that up with, it's so symptomatic of racing. If you ask a tricky question, you're greeted with silence constantly, because no one, I'm not going to knock jockeys. It's a hard game, especially jump jockeys. It's a hard game. And we know how competitive it is, and you need to ride winners. You need to be in the game. You need to keep your rides and all the rest of it, because it's a tough business. But it is so ungratifying to watch horses being repeatedly struck in the wrong area.
And the thing is, the two names that you've brought up, they're not apprentice jockeys. They're not jockeys that haven't been around for a while. They're Tom O'Brien. Jesus, he's been Richard Johnson and Dickie Johnson's understudy for goodness knows how long. Colin Keane, he's got one of the biggest, I think he was Irish champion jockey. Maybe he's got one of the biggest sort of retaining rides, sort of setups over in Ireland. And even Sylvester De Souza, he's ended up being banned, and he was a former champion jockey who's ended up being given the job with Godolphin once, and
that's
power.
The same thing for De Souza. It's exactly the same thing, striking the horse in the incorrect place. It's happened twice since he's had shoulder surgery. That was the excuse he put forward. We're talking about a former champion now. We're not talking about some young apprentice or up-and-comer. We're talking a former champion who's ridden hundreds and hundreds of winners, who's had big jobs and lost them, by the way. But to be done twice for the same thing in a short period of time, it's absolutely absurd.
But I'd just like to add that I'm not an anti-whip merchant. I'm an advocate of the whip. In the right hands for me, I know people might disagree, but in the right hands for me and used in the correct manner, it's a valuable tool. But and I'm a big fan of the whip. I think it's very useful, but even I cringe when I watch.
I think it's one of those, as in whether or not you sit on the either side of the fence when it comes to the whip. The whip's there. The whip is allowed as it stands at the moment. Use it correctly. That's it. Do you know what I mean? You've got this tool. Fine. With this tool, you have a bit of power wielding it. Use it wisely, as they would say. You've got rules. You've got regulations. Sylvester De Souza's breached them. Do you think it's potentially, and I'm not going to label this point, but it's perhaps something to think about at a later date, but the fact that it's bigger name riders and it's not riders that are apprentices. Apprentices need to hold on to what few low-grade rides they're going to get at the start of their career. You touched upon Tom O'Brien, Colin Keane, Sylvester De Souza. Is a ban really that big for them? I mean, at the end of the day, Sylvester De Souza, yes, he's going to potentially miss out on some big races, big Group 1s. But in terms of day-to-day pay packets, money in his back pocket, I mean, he's going to get a pick of as many rides as he wants. He's got a retainer's fee for a massive, massive operation in King Power. Same with Colin Keane, and even Tom O'Brien now, he's going to be number one jockey at Philip Hobbs. Yes, they might miss out on some big races and obviously potential cut of prize money, but that's only if your horse wins. I mean, aside from that, they're still going to be able to pick up 20, 30 plus rides a week. No problem with the same riders' fees or aim jockey fees. Anyway, that's my little mini rant at the end of it. Obviously, let us know what you think in the comments below. Obviously, if you want to be brave enough and answer Matt's question in regard to the rules, then feel free to do so. We've touched upon that, chaps. As it's become sort of our regular segment, it is head-to-head. We don't have a head-to-head to go at between you two this week, but I will play the intro and I will give the results of last week's rundown from you, the public.
Head-to-head.
Obviously, last week, I basically put to you guys who you think the best ever horse to be trained by Gordon Elliott is. Chris, you went with Don Cossack. Matt, you went with Tiger Roll. We put it to the public vote. The public have voted. And to be honest with you, we've all pretty much said that it was a lot closer than we expected it to be. I think it's safe to say that in terms of class, all three of us would probably agree Don Cossack is the classiest horse, maybe, that Gordon Elliott.
Get on with it, for fuck's sake.
But as expected, the public have voted in their droves. Tiger Roll, with only 57.7% of the vote, does take it to Don Cossack's 42.3%. Now, I don't know about you, Matt, but I'm surprised that it's that close.
Yeah, I mean, I did put a good case for. I plucked at the heartstrings a little bit. I mean,
oh yeah,
you know,
it was like shooting fish in a barrel. Come on.
But he is. I just love his tenacity for a small horse. To jump round Aintree and to have won at so many Cheltenham. Like we were speaking just before we come on air, and Chris is quite right. 3 miles round Cheltenham, and Tiger Roll doesn't get within 60 lengths of Don Cossack level weights. But you can't deny the little horse's courage and tenacity.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a case of heart over head a little bit. And I mean, it's like we all touched upon Red Rum and the affection that everyone of that generation has for him. When how good a horse he was compared to the likes of, I don't know, various, Cheltenham Festival winners, Cheltenham Gold Cup winners of that time. We don't really know, boys. You can't really crib multiple Grand National winners. However, that being said, we do not have a head-to-head for this week. But what we do have is something that I'm going to introduce. I don't have a jingle, don't have any sort of musical interlude. I know I'm not going to fucking make one up on the spot. Get piss off. But it's going to be something that I can get involved with. All three of us go up against each other in a vote for next week. Something that I'm going to introduce called Fantasy Stable. Now, boys, listen up and listen up good. I'm going to do something different this week. Like I said, it's going to give us all the opportunity to get stuck in. So, gents, for next week, I need you to come up with your best of the best from the past 26 years. So, from 1995 up to the present day. So, what we're going to be doing is accepting horses trained, like I said, from 1995 up until now. Any horse in that frame, we're going to stick to the flat, seeing as though it is still the flat season. I will need you to come up with a star-studded stable of 4 horses. You will need a sprinter, a 1.5 mile horse, a stayer, and your best handicapper. Now, the handicapper can be over any trip you want. These are the 4. I was going to include 5 horses and go for a mile, but it's safe to say we'd all pretty much pick Frankel, and that'd just be pretty boring. So, however, with these 4 horses, there are 3 stipulations to make it a little bit interesting. 1, they must have raced in either the UK or Ireland at least once in their career. So even if you do fancy a horse from overseas, they still need to have raced in the UK or Ireland at least once. The horses have to have raced at least 2 seasons between 1995 and 2021. So you couldn't have some superstar that ended their career in 95 with 1 season. They need to have had at least 2 seasons within that 26-year time frame. And this is the 3rd stipulation, which makes it a little bit more trickier than perhaps just picking a few names of the sort of obvious names. Each horse you pick cannot share more than 3 years worth of their career with any other horse that makes your fantasy stable. So, for example, if you had a horse that's raced from 2006 to 2011, you can't have a horse that's also raced from, say, 2007 to 2010. They can't have more than 3 years within that same time frame. So we're going to be looking at horses all across that spectrum from 95 to 2021. Next week, you come back with your 4 horses. We put them forward in our fantasy stables, and we see which comes out on top when the public vote. Now, I know you're looking at me now. I'll make sure it's written down. I'll send it all to you. Don't worry. It's just scratching your head. So
the first rule already.
Yeah, sounds all right.
I hear instructions going on here.
1 mile, 4 horse, a stayer, and a handicapper. Again, the handicapper can be over any trip you want. I will send that to you. The public will get their opportunity to vote next week, and we'll see which 4 horses come out on top. Obviously, I will put that on social media as well. If anyone else wants to get involved, try their hand at coming up with their 4 best over the next 26 years. The last 26 years. we will ensure that we give them a plug next week. It's going to be a head scratcher. It's something to get a notepad and pen out and probably swear at me in a group chat over the next 7 days for. But anyway, chaps, we will see you next week. Moving on, as always, we've had a week full of 4 days worth at Doncaster and other racing from Monday until Monday. So it's time for the notebook. Lads, obviously, people have been putting horses in the tracker. Unfortunately, the horse that you liked last week, Chris, that you told everyone to note, Jawal, ended up being pulled. It was heavily backed for the Portland. Ended up being pulled. Would you still ask people to keep hold of that horse, keep it in the notebook, potentially cropping up later on in the season?
Yeah, definitely would. But I would be concerned if it was to race on genuine soft ground. I think that's why they took it out. Most of his form is, or his best form is on good or good to firm. So perhaps with the little caveat, you wouldn't really want to bet that horse on genuine testing ground or soft.
So with that in mind, Chris, I'll let you redeem yourself this week. Any horses you like the look of from last week that people should be popping in the trackers, writing down for future races?
Yeah, just the one this week. And this horse ran at Musselburgh in the 4 o'clock on Saturday. Not a very good race, but the name of the horse is 3 Saints Bay. This horse has dropped dramatically in the ratings, somewhere to the tune of around £20 since he last won. He finally showed much more like his old self when third behind Newbolt and Oso Rapido. On the face of it, a couple of furlongs out, the horse looked like he was going to win, which, I mean, it would have taken me by surprise. He certainly went into my track immediately afterwards because it was such a strong showing of form for him. And inside the last furlong, he just looked like a horse who'd forgotten to win. He's well handicapped. I can't imagine the handicapper will be too harsh if putting him up. I don't think he'll put him up at all, to be honest with you. And he's a winner waiting to happen. So 3 Saints Bay.
Okay, so that's 3 Saints Bay for Mr. Connolly. Mr. Polly, anything that you like the look of over the last week?
Well, nothing that I'd be happy to be that confident about. But my nap today, Buxton Real, trained by Ian Williams, finished second at Kempton. Didn't quite get the rub of the green, and there's a winner in waiting. He'll definitely be winning on the all-weather. If not his next start, maybe he'll definitely win a race before the season's out. And
who trains that, Matt?
Ian Williams.
Ian Williams.
And maybe looking a bit further ahead to the jump season. What's the O'Brien horse that got supplemented for the Ledger? His name's completely gone out of my head. He's a disappointing horse, isn't he?
I'll tell you now.
Was third in the Dante behind Hurricane Lane.
Oh, now you're asking. I can see it. It is. I mean, feel free to fill time here, boys, because I'm going to be taking it.
Which horse?
High Definition.
High Definition, yeah. So maybe looking ahead to the Cheltenham Festival, maybe a Triumph Hurdle for High Definition. in the colours of JP McManus for Joseph O'Brien, maybe.
Could just see it, can't you?
Yeah.
Stranger things have happened. God, imagine trying to quote a price now, Jesus. So it's 3 Saints Bay for Chris, Buxton Real for Matt. Again, just the one for me this week. One that I was quite impressed with at Donny. Didn't win, but I think finished 4th. That was in the what they call the Kazoo handicap on the Friday. I think it was a 3:45 race. 6.5 furlong sprint handicap. It's a 7-year-old trained by Richard Spencer called Bernardo O'Reilly. The horse was kind of unlucky, to be honest. It found traffic problems, didn't get the greatest break. Had too much to do, but once it got a gap, absolutely flew home to finish in 4th. It's still not above its last winning mark. Has been known to run up until November in the past, so it likes a long campaign. So I'd presume that they're going to do the same again, connections, and you'll still see the horse taking another 2, 3, maybe 4 runs before winter really hits. I'm not put off by his age. I expect him to drop in class now that he's racing Class 2 company, and that could be when he pounces. As he comes from a lesser known stable as well with Richard Spencer, I also expect him to be a relatively decent price. Each way, rather than a horse that I think is going to be guaranteed to bag a victory, but could end up picking up a decent bit of place money for each way punters at a price. So that's mine. The horse goes by the name of Bernardo O'Reilly for the trainer Richard Spencer. So those are our three. Make sure you make a note of them, put them in your trackers, and hopefully they'll pay off before the flat season comes to a close. Lads, finally, and by no means least, it is our regular slot. Who am I? Where I give 5 different horses. Matt obviously knows the drill by now because he's so used to winning. Chris, believe it or not, has won. I mean, whether or not you can remember that far back, who knows? However, I did say last week, so you've had a week to prep, well, 8 days even, that these are all going to be horses over the last 20-odd years that have tasted success at Doncaster's St. Ledger meeting before. So without further ado, chaps, to round off the show, let's play another game of Who Am I?
Who am I?
So, lads, here we go. First, horse. Remember, for those that are uninitiated, we're going to give 5 clues to a horse. If you guess it after 1, you get 5 points. 2 clues, it's 4 points. 3 clues, it's 3. 4 clues, it's 2 points. And 5 clues, it is 1 point. Person with the most points by the end of the 5th horse takes home the prize. Chaps, are we ready?
Yep.
Yeah, don't all scream at once. Cheers, chaps. Grumpy bastards. First horse. First clue for the first horse. In the last 10 years of the Portland Stakes, 2 horses have both placed and won the race. I am one of these horses. That's in the last 10 years of the Portland Stakes. 2 horses have both placed and won the race. I am one of these horses. Clue number 2. This now 13-year-old not only won the Portland, but also claimed 2 listed victories and a Group 3 success in their career. This now 13-year-old not only won the Portland, but also claimed 2 listed victories and a Group 3 success in their career. Clue number 3. For most of his career, he was trained by Roger Varian. For most of his career, he was trained by Roger Varian. Chris?
Steps.
Chris has gone with Steps for 3 points. That'd be correct.
Yes.
The other 2 clues were his riders wore the blue and white silks of owner Michael Hill, who still has horses in training to this day. And clue number 5, this horse shares its name with a famous UK late 90s, early noughties pop group. It is indeed Steps for 3 points. Mr. Connolly takes the lead. 3-0 up.
Stop.
Up, here we go. 4 more horses to go. Horse number 2. Clue number 1. In the past 20 years, Frankie Dettori has ridden 4 Ledger winners. This horse is one of those 4. In the past 20 years, Frankie Dettori has ridden 4 Ledger winners. This horse is one of those 4. Clue number 2. In the year he won the Ledger, Motivator won the Derby, and Footsteps in the Sand won the 2,000 guineas. In the year he won the Ledger, Motivator won the Derby, and Footsteps in the Sand won the 2,000 guineas. It's Matt for 4 points.
I'm guessing here it's one of 2, but I'm going to go for Conduit.
Matt's gone for Conduit. That's incorrect. It is not Conduit. Chris has 3 more clues with no challenge by Matt. Clue number 3. 58 days prior to his Ledger win, he claimed his first Group 1 success in the 1 mile, 4 furlongs Grand Prix de Paris at Longchamp. 58 days prior to his Ledger win, he claimed his first Group 1 success in the 1 mile 4 furlongs Grand Prix de Paris at Longchamp. Clue number 4. In the 9 races after his Leger success, he only won on one occasion. That was the Coronation Cup under Mick Cannan in 2007. In the 9 races after his Leger success, he only won on one occasion, the Coronation Cup under Mick Cannan in 2007. Final clue. Sired by Monsieur, owned by John Magnier, and trained at Ballyborough by Aidan O'Brien.
Stop.
Do you want me to run through the clues quickly again?
No. Scorpion. It's Scorpion.
Yeah.
Oh, Milan. Scorpion, I think, but...
You going for Scorpion? That'd be correct.
Yeah. I went, as soon as I said Conduit was about 4 or 5 years later.
That's Chris 4, Matt Neal. Sure, I mean, Bluminek.
Pressure.
3 more horses to go. Horse number 3, clue number 1. Stradivarius won the Doncaster Cup this past week to take his race victories to 2. However, since the year 2000, 2 other horses have claimed the Doncaster Cup twice.
Chris.
Did you want me to finish this clue? Are you going for it, Mr. Connolly? Go on then.
Persian Punch.
Incorrect.
Had to do it.
Incorrect. I'll finish off the clue. So actually, I'll read it again. Stradivarius won the Doncaster Cup this past week to take his race victories to 2. However, since the year 2000, 2 other horses have claimed the Doncaster Cup twice, both of which came in back-to-back years. This horse is one from that duo. Clue number 2. The horse won the race as both a 7 and an 8-year-old. The horse won the race as both a 7 and an 8-year-old. Clue number 3. When he won the race for the second time, the horse that finished second as runner-up that day went on to claim the race the following year. When he won the race for the second time, the horse that finished as runner-up that day went on to claim the race the following year.
Matt, I'm gonna have to guess because I'm gonna lose up points here. It's not Blue Bajan, is it?
No, it's not.
Oh, it can't be Millenary, can it?
It can indeed.
Oh, you're joking.
It's Millenary.
Oh,
In both Doncaster Cup victories, he was partnered by jockey Richard Quinn. He found plenty of career success at Doncaster, winning 3 of a total of 3 times from 3 starts to maintain an unbeaten record at the course. The other race he won at the Yorkshire course was St. Leger. Indeed, it was Millenary. I wouldn't give a bonus point, but I'm just going to put it out there. Name the horse that finished second behind it and then won the race the next year.
I don't know. No,
my favourite staying horse of all time, Sergeant Cecil. Thank you. There we go. It was Millenary. However, despite a free hit, Matt couldn't get the horse. It is still 4-0 for Mr. Connolly with 2 horses left to go. Horse number 4, clue number 1. I won both of my career starts at Doncaster. My maiden in July 2017 and also the May Hill Stakes the same year. I won both of my career starts at Doncaster, my maiden in July 2017 and also the May Hill Stakes the same year. Clue number 2. I went on to win a total of 6 Group 1 races before retiring with my last race in October 2019. I went on to win a total of 6 Group 1 races before retiring with my last race in October 2019. Clue number 3. In those 6 Group 1 victories, my nearest rivals and runners-up were September, With You, Muses Amica, Alpha Centauri, Happily, and once again, With You. In those 6 Group 1 victories, my nearest rivals and runners-up were September, With You, Muses Amica, Alpha Centauri, Happily, and again, With You was runner-up behind the horse once more. For those that cannot see the live screen, we'll just zoom into Matt, who's got his hands on his head. Clue number 4. My only Group 1 success on English soil came at Newmarket. My only Group 1 success on English soil came at Newmarket. Clue number 5. I was owned by John Dance and trained in the north.
Matt. Lawrence.
Oh.
It is Lawrence indeed. It is 4-1. Matt, could this be the greatest fight back ever? I was owned by John Dance and trained in the north by Carl Burke. I was indeed Lawrence. 5th and final horse. Matt, can he throw a Hail Mary and take the victory? Or will Mr. Connolly hold on? Clue number 1 for horse number 5. Clue number 1. This year's St. Ledger meeting was broadcast on ITV Racing, but only from Thursday to Saturday. As such, I was the first group race winner of the meeting to be shown on ITV this year. I was the first group race winner of the meeting to be shown on ITV this year. Clue number 2. I beat 5 race rivals, with Prosperous Voyage finishing closest to me in second by 3 3/4 lengths. I beat 5 race rivals, with Prosperous Voyage finishing closest to me in second by 3 3/4 lengths. This happened, I think, 4 or 5 days ago, chaps. 4 days ago. Clue.
Chris. I'm going to butcher it down. In Spiral.
Now, either you've won or Matt's got 3 clues unanswered to try and either draw things level or win. But he doesn't need them. He's not going to get them because it is indeed. Mr. Connolly with a score of 8-1. Not even close. As he sweats away.
Retiring.
He sweats away. It is indeed in Spiral. The other clues for those that are listening, I went off the short odds on favourites at 9-2 I was ridden by Frankie Dettori, and I am currently as short as 5-1 and the clear favourite for next year's 1,000 guineas. It is indeed in Spiral. Well, Mr. Connolly, look at you. Well done, you. It's taken about 5 years off you, but you know.
Oh, dear. That's
at least £2 lost. Fair play, Matt. I mean, I have to give him these advantages, you know, like giving meetings that he does really well at, courses that he's local to, you know.
I was waiting for Wentworth Falls, but it didn't come, did it?
Yeah. I wouldn't be that nice, dear.
Kingston Hill or Levitate, something like that.
I know, well, I'll be honest with you, I ummed and ahed with Kingston Hill, but I thought, no, not going to be that nice. I thought, to be honest with you, the one that you didn't get, I thought was right up your street with Mel Henry.
Well, I knew it after you'd said a few more.
When did Persian Punch? What sort of era Persian Punch? 90s?
I don't know. No, early 2000s, what is Persian Punch?
I don't think so, mate, because it wasn't the other horse that won 2 Doncaster Cups.
No, he might not have done it. He definitely won it once. He made all. He made all and won by about 8 or 9 lengths one year, I think.
It did. Let's have a look. Persian Punch won Doncaster Cup. Actually, I should be way out here now.
Early 2000s.
No, you're right. 2003. Just the once, though.
Yeah.
I know I've probably just said it then. Can you remember the other horse that won it twice since the year 2000? That isn't Stradivarius? No.
No.
No, Black and Green Silks. Time's up.
Yeah, Dunlop.
Yeah.
Anyway,
to be honest with you, when I was looking through it, I could not remember.
Next week's quiz are sprint handicappers from the 80s.
Anything before Chris was born. No, next week, and I'm going to make it even easier for you, so you're not going to have a look at much. Are horses that have either placed or won in the Air Gold Cup since the year 2000. It is the Air Gold Cup next week. So it's horses that have either placed or won. And by placed, I want to say the top 3. I'm not going to end up with like sort of bookmakers that offer 7 places. Like, forget that. Let's say horses that have placed in the top 3 in the Air Gold Cup since the year 2000. So get studying, gents. As always, though, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for anyone that's watching or listening. As always, give this a like. Rate it on any of the platforms that you listen to our podcast. Make sure that what else can you do? You can throw some comments at us, any questions that you want us to answer next week. By all means, do so. Make sure you stay tuned in for next week's Fantasy Stable. And obviously another game of Who Am I? I've been Rory. He's been Chris. He's been Matt. And thank you for listening to the Turf Talk podcast.